Does U.S. corn and soybean production have a revenue problem? Well, it's easy to have that knee-jerk reaction and say, yes, we all hope we had higher yields and higher commodity prices, but ultimately, as producers, we're price takers and we don't have a whole lot of influence over Mother Nature and final yields. So let's take a look at this revenue story. This is shown here in green. These are budgeted crop budget revenues, and it goes back to the early 90s all the way up until 2026. This is for a 50-50 crop rotation coming out of Indiana. You can see there's been an upward trend. Of course, those booms and resets, you can see the boom here. So corn and soybean revenue for that budget went from about $300 an acre up to $8, and then selling a little bit below 600, around $550, $575 an acre. Then we had another boom. We got close to 1,000, and we reset somewhere around $700 an acre. And the implications here is that we've had a general trend upward over the last 2 or 3 decades. Now let's take a look at contribution margin. As a reminder, contribution margin is revenue minus variable costs. It's how much is left over to cover our fixed overhead, such as machinery ownership, labor, cash rent for our land, and maybe even some debt service obligations that we might have. We haven't seen nearly as much upward trend over time. We've had a little less than $200 in contribution margin throughout the 90s and 2000s. That jumped to a little bit more than 200 between 2014 and 2020, and now we're somewhere on this $225 an acre range. So going back to the first question, the U.S. corn and soybean production system probably has more of a contribution margin problem than a revenue problem. So we've seen revenue trend up, but we haven't seen that contribution margin that producers rely on steadily increase. And so we start thinking about the role of government payments. We think about the role of consolidation in agriculture. It's ultimately a lot of this contribution margin story. It's going to be really part of the story. So producers have really got to keep an eye on this and think about what the implications are for the long term. That's all we have time for this week. Be sure to check out the full article in the link description described down below.